Most Americans tend to remember the Battle of Lexington along with its sister battle of Fort Concord. There is much we can learn from this first true battle of the Revolutionary War, even though it was a loss. What I believe most important is why the British were marching on Concord in the first place. The colonists' own government had ordered the confiscation of their arms. The British government was not concerned with the treatment of their fellow citizens in the colonies. They were concerned those colonists might seriously stand up against them. Sure, small acts of defiance had happened, but what if those colonies actually tried to defend themselves against the violation of their rights as British citizens? This could not be tolerated. Patrick Henry would later expound during the Virginia ratification debate. Are we at last brought to such a humiliating and debasing degradation that we cannot be trusted with arms for our own defense? Similarly today, we see governments at all levels infringing on our right to keep and bear arms. Look at the arguments they use. Beto O'Rourke said, "Hell yes, we're going to take away your AR-15, your AK-47. Barack Obama says, "I don't believe people should be able to own guns." Senator Dianne Feinstein said, "If I could have gotten an outright ban, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn in your guns, I would have." Rahm Emanuel said, "We're bending the law as far as we can to ban an entirely new class of guns." President Bill Clinton once said, "If the personal freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution inhibit the government's ability to govern the people, we should look to limit those guarantees." Lastly, back to Senator Feinstein, banning guns addresses a fundamental right of all Americans to feel safe. We hear claims that citizens should not be allowed to own weapons of war, yet this battle is a perfect example of why we need them. As the Second Amendment states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. First, whether that government be foreign or domestic, the people need arms to keep themselves free. The militia who defended their rights in Lexington and Concord were not part of a national militia, just a group of local men standing up against the tyrannies of their own government. This is why the Constitution protects the right of every individual to keep and bear arms. If we forget that the war for independence started because of gun control, then we may be doomed to repeat such a war. Second, for all the talk of the power of the federal government, the battles of Lexington and Concord show that an outnumbered force can defend themselves against a superior one. The 77 militiamen at Lexington slowed the British march, not only giving those in Concord time to hide their arms, but giving neighboring militias time to assemble. What could a small group of Americans today do to slow the advance of tyranny? Look at what's happening at the border in Texas. Not only has a small group in the state militia stood up to the infringements of the federal government, but they have given time for other states to rally to their cause. Lastly, we see that there are things worth fighting for, even in the face of incredible odds. 77 brave men stood before 700. When asked to stand their ground, they did. Now, I do not believe they did so for flag and country because they were fighting against those things. I believe they were standing up for rights and family. The Declaration of Independence had not even been proposed yet, but these men were standing to protect the rights of their neighbors to possess the tools for their defense. I believe they understood that should this most basic and fundamental right of self-defense against man, beast, or government be abolished in Concord, Lexington could not be far behind. What would become of their families without such tools of defense? How would their children and grandchildren live in a land where they could not defend themselves against the violation of their rights by their own government?